down the hammer and pick up the pencil. You're about to listen to the Savvy Radio Show. Learn from real-life real estate investors, experience revealed with the Savvy Landlord as your host.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls from around the world, we are in a... Man, this has to happen. Here's the situation, folks. First of all, my recorder broke about 5 minutes ago before to do this podcast, which not only this frustrates me, number two, I am stepping out of my severe comfort zone, and I normally do not talk about these specific subjects publicly, just because I don't want to offend anyone or hurt anyone, or I have no idea whoever is going to listen to this podcast. But I think this is going to be a very, very powerful podcast for ladies and gentlemen that own property, or ladies and gentlemen that, are just frustrated of the whimsical of things that are just changing the law, the commandments, everything that's going on. So I just want to be upfront with you. I am not a political person. I am not one-sided or the other side. The Democrats are bad and Republicans are terrible, or however you personally think, and especially with the fake news, Facebook, and just aggregating information that's just emotional. Temperatures flaring. I get frustrated. I see racial stuff. I see all these things, and then my mind tries to fit it all in, and then all of a sudden someone doesn't pay their rent. And it just goes on, and then we really just don't have accurate information to make sound decisions in society. And here today, I want to let you know that a friend of mine, and I'm going to keep this gal's information just private for her because she has spent, I would say, years, decades, and hours aggregating this information for me. And she has a heart and a passion to share all the research that she's done. And, in my lifetime, I'm 46 years old. I've met, I thought, everyone. And I thought I've met the weirdest people and the craziest people. But when I see someone that's extremely passionate about making a difference in society, in both sides, not just for the landlord. Yes, we're pro-landlord. Let's just be clear. And for the tenant too. I mean, we love tenants. They are working and they have a job and they want to rent. And there's people out there, ladies and gentlemen, that just want to rent. And I think that way as I get older in my life. I want someone to take care of me. I want someone to cut the grass for me. I want to make one phone call and my heat and air is fixed and I don't have a financial burden. And so this is not landlord versus tenant. I just want to make sure you're clear on that. What we're going to talk about today with Miss Maria, right? Maria? Is that what I'm going to call you? Maria? I don't know. We got this code name. It doesn't matter. Miss Maria. And she is an amazing woman that has dedicated her life at being the best. Being the best in the late 80s as a contractor, in her 30s. So I'm giving you some perspective here. Being a female and being a contractor, you got to have kahunas. You got to have thick skin. She's been doing landlording since the 1900s. Not 1900s, 1990s. And I'm just playing. And she's been in Oklahoma since the 1990s and doing landlording. And then she's actually dabbled in landlording in the 70s. So on the top of that. So I want to give you a perspective. Yes, she has units. Yes, she is dealing with some deadbeat tenants that are not paying rent. Yes, she bleeds. She's human. Her color does not matter. What matters is how thankful I am, Miss Marie, that I know you and that you're willing to get it all out on the table of what's going on with this CDC order. So let's just start right there. Explain to me what this CDC order is and how is that even legally possible that you can tell me what to do with my property. I mean, I know there's this command, what is it called? The amendments, the commandments. You could tell me what to do. And so let's start. It's your turn, Maria.
Well, first of all, the CDC recently issued an order, and the order actually says that there is a ban on evictions until after December the 31st of 2020. And this means that if the tenants cannot pay rent, which a lot of them can't because they've lost their jobs and they've
Sure.
been affected by COVID-19, but if they can't pay it, they actually get to accrue the rent for September, October, November, and December. And then January the 1st, January's rent is due. That means that they have up to 5 months of rent that is due on the 1st of January, which sets it up to fail for the tenant, because if the tenant can't pay in September, they definitely are not going to be able to pay 5 months in January.
Yes.
And for the landlords, on the other side of the coin, this sets up for failure because most of them have their mortgage payments. They have their property taxes that are coming due at the end of the year in Oklahoma. They have their insurance, their maintenance, their repairs, and they're still required to keep the units in good working condition as before, but now without the income. And so this has set up a situation for both landlords and for tenants. And it's just really not a good situation. It was with good intentions, but unfortunately it didn't cover all of the avenues that should have been covered to be workable for both sides.
Absolutely. First of all, how is this even possible that the CDC can just send out a letter and it moved so fast, and then within a short amount of time, Virginia overturned that legal document? How is this even possible? Like, what's your take on that?
Well, first of all, it started with an executive order.
From the president?
Yes. But on September the 3rd, common sense tells you this had to already be in place with the CDC, because they just wouldn't have come up with this overnight. And on September the 4th, it was effective.
Yeah, but who gives it? So the president gave this organization, CDC, that's my understanding that they don't, this is like reaching, because how in the world do they have any experience in economics for tenancy?
What happened is, as you said, Virginia has already had a federal lawsuit that has been filed, and what they're claiming is the CDC has no authority. And the CDC took the authority under 2 federal codes. May I please read to you what the federal code is?
Please.
The federal code says that the CDC may provide for such inspection, fumigation, disinfection, sanitation, pest extermination, destruction of animals or articles found to be so infected or contaminated as to be sources of dangerous infection to human beings, and other measures as in his/her judgment may be necessary, quote unquote, to carry out and enforce such regulations.
So that's a health situation.
Yes, it is.
And but that may give them power if there is evidence of that in this residence.
Well, the lawsuit from Virginia, and this is what I'm reading from,
Sure.
but the lawsuit from Virginia at some point in time says that the CDC has that much power. They may also have the power next time and even within COVID-19 to tell you cannot go to church because people meet there and may get COVID-19. And this is in the lawsuit. It may tell you do not have the power to come outside your own home for any reason. And so there's a lot of concern that this may overstep the authority which they really were given. And they've stepped outside that boundary and they have took over other authority.
I'm still like, are we in a free nation? I mean, it seems like we're definitely going forward in socialism, where we're, like communism. Like, you can do this, you can't do that. You can charge this rent, you can't charge that rent. It doesn't sound advantageous for growth in my mind. I mean, I'm so frustrated, and I'm fortunate that I have the units and I'm able to do what I'm doing at the moment. But I can see 10 or 15 years, if we continue to lay down and let this happen, where we're going to go. How is this going to, and first of all, how can we protect ourselves as landlords? I mean, and then I see it's impossible, as you said earlier. How in the world, if they can't afford their rent today, and then you accumulate and add this together 5 months later, how are they going to even pay that? Then what are you going to do?
Well, to top it all off, they have had a ban on turning off utilities for tenants that are behind. Well, not tenants, but people. And I know a particular case where one person did not pay one bill since March of this year. And if this trend continues, when you combine not only a loss of employment, but you combine that with months of rent, and then you combine it with months of utilities, and there's just no way out other than to go to bankruptcy court. And this is just not good when you look at the United States wide, and you have approximately 48% of the people rent.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm so flabbergasted in that when I've been through several cycles, at least 2 cycles in the housing situation, where there has been vacancies and we're scrapping to fill units. But today, I'm talking about September 2020, I have no vacancies, and there's more supply. There's less supply than demand. There's more demand, and at the same time, so I know if an tenant got evicted today, I could fulfill that space. But now the government is controlling me and saying, no, I can't fill that space. But then there's people that have money that can move in there. And like, I just don't understand that aspect too. If we're so broken as a America, and we have no money and everybody's laid off, and I understand all this jazz, but then I have such a massive demand for housing as of today. So I'm in a severe pickle. I need to get these folks that can't pay out, and then I don't want to be mean or rude. I mean, I don't want to put anyone on the street if economically they can't afford it. But can they really not afford it? Are they getting other assistance? Are they getting assistance from being unemployment? I know that they've passed that. More unemployment has been coming down, and people are living off unemployment. I run into an individual that's a friend of mine that I know personally. I want to say friend. And I'm like, hey, how's the job hunting going? There's no reason for me to go look for a job because I'm getting more in unemployment than I did before. So it's just this perfect storm that is brewing on the backs of landlords. And yeah, I get it. We got to help people and defer payments. And I mean, defer rent. And I did that in the beginning in February, March. I had a plan in place, and I've been executed a plan. It's been working. People have got caught up 3-4 months later. I haven't really had to evict anyone. Obviously, I couldn't evict anyone because the courthouses were closed. But now you're giving everyone a free opportunity. Why would I want to pay my rent? I can just go by the law.
Well, and file for bankruptcy. What concerns me also, there are a lot of things, but another thing that concerns me is the penalties that are attached.
Okay, let's go into that.
Yeah, I really would like to. The order of the CDC actually says that a landlord can be fined up to $100,000 and or sent to jail for 1 year for evicting a tenant.
That's powerful.
One tenant. Well, they compounded that, and they said if they find that a death resulted because the tenant moved in with other people, in other words, another household of people, and you had someone with COVID and there was a death that was involved, the fine goes up to $250,000, and of course it still carries the and or 1 year in jail. But if it's an organization, in other words, someone that owns a lot of property, the fine is increased to $500,000 per event, along with the possibility by the U.S. Department of Justice, who has the authority under this to initiate court proceedings with criminal penalties involved.
You know, I wonder if this has been written for massive housing in like New York or metropolitan, where this could be a severe domino effect. I mean, it just sounds like we're driven by fear. If this person is evicted, I can't control this individual, what bars they go to, if they wear a mask or not, if they exercise or not, right? They may have bad health. They make a bad decision, go to a nightclub. You can see this on the news. They go to Scourges, whatever that thing in South Dakota. Then they get COVID. I'm responsible, and I'm going to get fined because they partied. They got COVID. They ran out of money. I can't evict them. But then I figure out a way to do evict them. And then now I'm responsible for a minimum of $100,000, depending if I have more than a few units. Now
and if somebody dies, then you can go to prison.
Yeah.
Well,
so, like, I mean, first of all, I mean, my one question is there a CDC police? Is there a COVID police? I mean, that's the one thing I think that we need to think about, that we're driven by fear here. and that's communism in my mind. But like, and I'm not a political person, but I'm like, it just seems like everywhere I turn around, I'm driven by fear. I'm like, who's going to arrest me for just doing what that's legally bound? This is my property. We've lost belief that I sacrificed. I didn't go out, and I every dollar I inched and saved, I'm penalized for being successful for owning a piece of property. And now, I mean, like, why does the government have right to tell me what to do, when to do it, how to do it? I thought we had this thing called freedom.
Well, what the lawsuit actually says, I'm referring to the one in Virginia, again, the federal lawsuit.
Okay.
But it says that they actually took powers above the executive branch that were not so authorized to them. And so part of this, I think we're going to have to wait and play out. It is the responsibility of each state to carry this individually. In other words, in Virginia, they no longer do evictions based upon the CDC guidelines, but rather the way that the state laws of Virginia were written. And each state, if they file a lawsuit, in other words, if someone here in Oklahoma files a lawsuit, then it will be decided in the federal courts too, and that may put a stop to it.
All right, what's your take on Oklahoma City evictions? I know the courts just now recently opened. I know that they're several weeks behind. I would say 6 weeks minimum on an eviction. You know, you study the law a lot. You read a lot about the law. Do you see Oklahoma following suit to Virginia? Ohio is a very dramatic place for law, for a Landlord-Tenant Act. What's your take on that?
As I said, each state will have to have an individual that files a federal lawsuit. And it would take the accumulation of all of the different states to work together. Basically, you have the CDC on one hand that has some authority, but has taken other authority, and they are one group that is taking on the whole United States in one fell swoop, and within 24 hours we reacted and did as they said. But on the other hand, you have to find one landlord in each of the 50 states that files the lawsuit. There are other options that we do have.
And I'm thinking, I don't want to have a conspiracy theory here, but you know, I love landlords. I'm pro-landlord, and I know that we're fragmented. We're not organized as a
not at the national level.
But we're the most wealthy people apparently. Because I'm not saying wealthy people. Like when you think of, because we own property, you must be rich. So I'm assuming
perception.
Yeah, and just society in general. I can barely afford my payments because I make bad decisions. But you have several units or several houses. You must be rich. That's not true. But but the reality is, I think that that's why all this is coming down on landlords. Like you said earlier, and you didn't say this, but I know that they're just shifting to sectors, real estate, where there is potential money to be made because landlords need to pay for this. But we're not going to get a bailout because we are fragmented. We're not one institution unless we band together. But we're all. I don't even know how that's even possible.
Well, in this particular instance, it has to be one person that files the federal lawsuit per state.
Which costs money, which you have to find a good attorney that loves landlords, that is a landlord himself. I mean, there's a few of them.
Well,
but their life is affected. Their life is affected. They have to, I mean, how many hours have you spent? I mean, we're sitting here, ladies and gentlemen, we're sitting here with like pages and pages of notes and laws and court documents all right here, just to understand what's happening, what our legal right is.
And I am not an attorney.
Sure.
I'm just a plain landlord, but because it affects everyone, I took the time to research it.
Yeah, and that's why I'm so thankful that you're on the show. What's your take on Oklahoma City or Oklahoma in general? I mean, are we behind? Are these
the
evictions going to be happening? What are my local landlords are going to do? And I can't imagine what Ohio. I've noticed in Ohio that they get hammered so much in legalities of Landlord-Tenancy Act. It seems like anything that can go wrong starts in Ohio and then just spreads throughout the country. Just when I follow the law in itself, I mean, Oklahoma's usually follow someone else. Are we a pro landlord state? I know Florida is for sure, because I've operated property in Florida, and they're very favorable there. In Oklahoma, we're very favorable as landlords versus Texas. But what can we do now, Maria? What can we do?
We're facing a crisis right now, but of course the whole country has. And in a way, landlords are no different than the medical field that faced it without having the PPEs that they needed when it all started, and it was so severe in New York. We've had the industrial section, we've had the manufacturing, we've had the commercial has been hit. We have people that own property downtown across the country in big cities that's sitting vacant. And it is just different segments of society, like dominoes in a row, have been hit with this. And now we're into the residential rental property is the next domino in a row to fall. We've had the farming industry hit it. We're hit hard.
Well, just
the
like
food
one thing that
industry.
I had lunch with someone the other day that really changed me, when they're about to start building a new project, the 70-something units, and they halted the project because 2x4s are $9 a piece versus 2x4s were $2. And the fact is because COVID has hit and they can't manufacture 2x4s because they've laid off or furloughed everyone at the lumberyard.
Well, and then that's compounded by the fact that you have a lot of truck drivers and even people that own trucking companies, and they are falling by the wayside financially because they cannot get the loads anymore, so therefore they can't stay in business. So what few people we still have that are working, that own the businesses that are still in business, people that are still able to afford rent, all of these different pools keep getting smaller and smaller. And what we're doing, we're not turning the tide to go back. What we're doing is, instead of turning the tide to go back and be financially sound, we keep gathering more and more and more groups in that are falling by the wayside. They're becoming part of the dominoes that are stacked.
You know, I operate another business, and one of the options that came up from the accountant was we need to ask the staff, the employees, do they want to withhold their Social Security tax? And it's very interesting, like, you know, I mean, it's such a small number. I mean, it's an important number. 7%. Yeah, 6.5%, 7%. But then it's due in the month
January.
In January. So it's like, hey, I'm going to give you this little loan.
But then you pay 13% come January the 1st.
And you're going to get hammered.
Well,
and it's just like, I don't understand.
It's almost like we're setting it up to have a real good Christmas where we spend every dime we have.
To induce the economy.
And then come January the 1st, the piper is due.
But you know, there's rumors or rumbling that, say you hold your Social Security out and you don't pay it, but then the government will bail it out later, which they don't have any money anyway. And then that goes into fiat money and then hyperinflation, and then we're just seriously getting into this perfect storm of confusion of our dollar will have no value. People will not have any money. People won't be paying rents. And then I don't hear any chatter about, hey, who's going to pay my mortgage payment? I mean, I don't know what the statistic is, but I saw the other day, it was in at least 35% in New York, apartment owners are defaulting on their apartments. And we're talking millions of dollars. We're not talking about a little flunky little apartment that I have. We're talking millions of dollars in default that these people are going to lose, these poor investors, individually or as a group or as a hedge fund, are going down because they cannot make their mortgage payment, because they can't charge rent. People are fleeing New York in droves. Then what's going to happen? Now we're going to hit this thing called foreclosure. Then what happens? There's a conspiracy theory.
Well, a lot of people are talking about depression, that we're heading for a true depression, more like we heard from the 20s, or even the long depression of 1879.
Well, you know, I heard through the grapevine that, let's say it does crumble and these landlords are just wiped out, and the government buys this foreclosed land, almost like an eminent domain type of situation.
Well, we passed a law in Oklahoma and I really can't remember at this time when, but it's been in the very recent past. But we passed a law that actually allowed municipalities the opportunity and the jurisdiction and the authority to buy private sector property. And this, at this particular time, it is not on the agenda, but it's kind of scary to think that if they could utilize that, what would happen to the properties that now go through tax sale? What would happen to the properties that go through foreclosure? Would the next step be that possibly they could have first access to these properties? And we do have to remember that we are a European-based society, and in Europe there are a lot of countries where you actually rent your property from the government. Hopefully it won't go that far, but we have got to really work hard to put a halt to this downward spiral that we're in.
Well, I mean, that's why I wanted you on the radio show, is like, what can we do as a society and as a group of landlords? I mean, I don't see myself getting out of the landlord. I remember my mentor told me, I can't remember, it scared me about 3 to 5 years ago. There was a law passed in Oklahoma that's, two laws that have passed that have been very disturbing, that one of them was turned. We can talk about that because a lot of people don't know this. But this one law was passed that any vacant property that was vacant over 30 days got penalized. And like mainly because they were trying to clean up the city. There was a lot of vacancies, a lot of distraught property that needed to be bulldozed.
Are you talking about the one where you actually had to keep the utilities on?
Well, like you get fined if you have a vacant property and you had to have it rented within 30 days. I'm like, and my mentor called me and said, Stephen, man, this is the only time in my entire life that I would be willing to leave, get out of real estate, because to rent a commercial property by itself, rehab, because the law didn't say if the property was being under construction, it was vacant, was the law. And just the amount of fines, and I never circled back. I think it never was enforced, but it's on the law books that if a property, they can inflict this law if a property has been vacant for a certain length of time.
They have the right
to severely fine you. And it was very disturbing. And then about 10 years ago, because I brought this up the other day, and I was in the middle of this law, and I was actually trying to do a PAC, a political action committee for landlords, and where Midwest City required you to pay to register every property, and you have to pay $25 for every property that you own in Midwest City. And then you have to turn in, they want to know who you are, what you're doing, where you're doing it, how you're doing it, how do I get a hold of you? And it was just a nuisance. And that lasted for about 3 years, and then Midwest City stopped doing it. But it was a big uproar, and I don't know, there's some very more powerful landlords that I admire fought that law, and eventually, well, what happened is that the Midwest City hired a staff people to take all these landlords' money to do this registration program. Basically, they were just charging another way, basically we're trying to get landlords out of Midwest City. Well, and it eventually foiled, but it's just like Del City right now, you have to pay $60 to do an inspection. And, there's a workaround, there's a side hustle where you can just keep utilities in your name. But as soon as the utilities change out of your name, the water bill, then that triggers an inspection on the property, which is $65 that you have to pay as a landlord. And then they come in there, and what stops them, just like this is why I'm not a big fan of judges, because what if they're having a bad day, they can fling, it's been working for 40 years. Electricity is 200 amp box, but hey, you didn't do a new code. You can get whatever that word is. I forgot the dang word, but rejected or condemned. And then you got to shut it down, lose revenue, get it up to code, get another inspection, spend thousands of dollars to get something that's already been working.
Well, I think that this problem all started if you have a town in the cluster of Oklahoma City, and they have utilized all of their land basically and built property on it, then they really don't have the revenue source. And so left without the revenue, they turned to other means.
Yeah.
And I was at the meeting when they were making the decision on Oklahoma City on the 30 days. And if a building's vacant, then they can go into condemnation process
Right.
unless you have utilities, which of course means that you're paying city water on a property that may be sitting vacant. You're not using the water. But this is really just a stretch for income.
Yes. And
And a
again, it boils
stretch.
down to people that, an average civil servant worker, do they own rental property? Probably not, a very small percentage. And people that just automatically assume that you own property, that you're wealthy. That is not true. Because you get cable TV and I don't, because I choose to spend $50 a month towards my assets and save those up over 20 years to buy a rental property. So that's my retirement, because I believe that Social Security and 401k are shams. Yeah, I mean,
There's a lot to think about.
All right, so we got the rant going on. Let's wrap this episode up with some positivity.
There is this order from the CDC really did have good intentions.
Mm-hmm.
What they were trying to do is to actually set it up so that there was a means to access federal funding. But in order to do that, you have to go through the eviction process, and then the tenant files out some paperwork, and then from that, they go in and apply for government funding. But it's set up the way that the tenant actually winds up with an eviction on their record. The landlord may not qualify unless there's certain properties, known properties, that will go through the CARES Act. And so it was set up with good intentions, but it was not as well thought out as it should have been.
So what you're saying is that CDC is try to push this through to help people with the CARES Act that need funding, but the only way the tenant can get funding if they are evicted. And so our goal here today is to stop that from happening before we can get to that terrible day.
Well, you've got a stepladder that's broken.
Okay.
And you're trying to get up here to get the federal money, but the stepladder is broken and it doesn't work. And a lot of people fall by the wayside as they're trying to go up the stepladder, and that's both landlords and tenants.
Right. I just want to provide housing for people, safe, affordable housing, and I just want to get my rent paid so I can pay my mortgage payment. And then I can make this small little spread. The people that are making all the money are the bankers. Just a side note. You didn't smile on that one. All right. So what? Oh, do we?
I'm off.
No, I think was this a sign within my auto? All right, we'll stop right here.
Thanks for listening to the Savvy Radio Show. Glide online and listen to our other motivating episodes at savvyradioshow.com. Connect on Twitter at LandlordBook and always be buying assets.